You've been sitting out here by these pumps too long. The clerk called you in as suspicious.
I didn't do anything. I'm just going over some work files.
Doesn't matter. You're under arrest for loitering. Turn off the engine and show me your hands.
You're making a big mistake. I'm the new head of internal affairs.
You can explain it downtown.
A bored patrol cop gets sent to a nothing call at a quiet gas station on the edge of town. He decides that nothing isn't good enough. Within a few minutes, he is putting handcuffs on a man who has broken no law, on camera, for the world to see. What he does not realize is that the man he is arresting is the one person inside the department who can pull his entire career apart line by line. This is a dramatized story based on real situations. Picture a small, anonymous city with the same problems as anywhere else. Long shifts, short tempers, and a police department that has had just enough complaints to make the local news once or twice, but not enough to change anything meaningful. People in town know how it works. If a cop has a bad day, you keep your head down, you say yes sir, and you hope their bad day doesn't become your record. Inside that department, policies about de-escalation, respectful communication, and careful use of authority exist on paper, are mentioned in training, and then slowly get buried under the weight of habit and attitude. The officer at the center of this story is one of those habits in human form. He is in his mid-30s, 7 years on the job, not the worst cop in the building, but nowhere near the best. He has a reputation for being proactive, which in his mind means stopping people just to see what falls out. He is the kind of officer who believes that hesitation is weakness, that anyone who questions him is showing attitude, and that complaints are just proof he is doing real police work. Officially, he has a few citizen complaints and one internal write-up for talking to people in an unprofessional manner. Unofficially, most of his supervisors have heard his name enough times to sigh when it comes up. On this particular night, he is 2 hours from the end of a long shift. He is cruising the outer edge of town, where the shops thin out and the roads go dark between the last strip mall and the first field. It is the kind of dead time where the radio is mostly quiet and the temptation to create your own action creeps up on you. He is thinking about getting off late, about the fight he had with his girlfriend before work, about the one traffic stop earlier in the night where someone muttered, "I'll see you in court," as they signed their ticket. None of it is serious, but it all adds up to a low, constant irritation humming under his skin. The call that comes over the radio is the kind that should slip through the night without leaving a scratch on anyone. The dispatcher's voice is flat, almost bored. A gas station on the edge of town. The clerk reporting a suspicious person who has been standing by a car at the pumps for a while, looking through papers, not really doing anything, not buying anything, just there. No threats, no weapons mentioned, no raised voices, no specific crime. It is the kind of call that could be handled with a quick drive-through and a wave. But in his head, the officer hears something else. He hears an opportunity to check someone out, to remind people who own the space under those lights. He keys his radio and says he will take it, adding a casual, "show me en route," like he is heading into something more serious than a bored clerk and a quiet man. At the gas station, the scene is almost painfully ordinary. There are no other cars at the pumps, only a single dark sedan parked under the awning. The convenience store is half lit, greenish light spilling out onto the concrete. Inside, behind the counter, the clerk pretends to straighten a row of candy bars while actually watching the man outside through the glass. The man himself stands by the driver's door with the door open, 1 foot inside, 1 foot out. A folder of documents propped against the roof of the car. He is not pacing. He is not shouting. He is not filming. He is simply reading, turning pages slowly, occasionally checking his phone, lost in thought. This man is not just any random driver. He is the department's newly appointed head of internal affairs, brought in from another city after a string of quiet but real problems. Officially, he is here to modernize accountability structures and restore public trust. Unofficially, he is here because the department has run out of ways to pretend everything is fine. In his folder are summaries of use of force incidents, traffic stop statistics broken down by neighborhood, and a stack of complaints that all seem to involve the same handful of names. One of those names is the officer currently rolling toward him with red and blue lights reflecting off the road. The internal affairs chief knew this job would mean long nights, but he did not expect to be standing at a gas station at nearly midnight, reading through the department's dirty laundry under buzzing fluorescent lights. He stopped here on his way home because the station is quiet, because the light is good, and because the thick paper files in his briefcase feel too heavy to ignore. He does not look intimidating. He is dressed in plain business clothes, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. To anyone passing by, he looks like a middle-aged man trying to shake off a long day. He is not wearing a badge on his belt. His ID is in his wallet, and his official credentials are in a small leather holder in his inside coat pocket, resting on the passenger seat. The clerk inside the store has seen him standing there for nearly 20 minutes. From the clerk's point of view, the man might be fine, but he might also be trouble. There have been a handful of late-night thefts recently. People filling up and driving off, small groups loitering near the pumps, one guy who smashed a display case after being refused a refund. The clerk does not want to confront anyone directly, does not want to risk being the one to escalate something, so he does what he has been told to do. He picks up the phone, calls the non-emergency police line, and uses the words he knows will bring a car, suspicious person. By the time the officer pulls into the lot, the internal affairs chief is absorbed in a paragraph about prior complaints on an officer with a familiar last name. He notices the first flicker of red and blue light across his papers and looks up, blinking, disoriented for a second as reality closes back in. The patrol car swings in a little faster than necessary, nose angle aggressive, headlights throwing his shadow against the car. The tires crunch over gravel at the edge of the concrete and come to a stop right in front of the pumps. Body cam rolling, the officer steps out of the car with the practiced movements of someone who has done this 100 times and never truly been challenged. He adjusts his vest with a quick tug, one hand resting near his holster not out of immediate fear but out of habit and posture. He scans the scene as if there might be hidden threats behind the fuel pumps or lurking in the shadows beyond the canopy, even though there is only one person there. And that person is standing totally still. From the moment he opens his mouth, the tone is off. There is no good evening, no hey, what's going on? Instead, there is a flat, sharp demand for explanation that comes across as accusation. He tells the man that people called him in as suspicious and that he has been hanging around too long. The words are technically factual, but delivered like a charge. The man, surprised and already tired, answers calmly that he is just going over some work files while waiting for a call, that he is not bothering anyone, that he will be done in a minute. In those first seconds, there is still a way out. The officer could glance down at the open folder, see the neat columns of printed reports and the departmental header at the top of each page, notice the calm posture and steady voice, and decide that this is nothing. He could tell the clerk inside that everything is fine, and that would be the end of it. Instead, he locks onto something else entirely, the fact that the man did not immediately apologize for existing in front of him. To this officer, hesitating before answering a question is disrespectful. Saying, "I haven't done anything wrong, I'm just reading," sounds like a challenge. The officer starts talking over him. He raises his voice slightly, not enough to shout, but enough to send a clear message that he is not interested in a conversation. He tells the man that this is private property, that the clerk does not want him there anymore, that he needs to wrap it up and leave immediately. When the man, still composed, asks whether the clerk actually said that or whether the officer is just assuming it, the officer hears only backtalk. The internal affairs chief has been on the other side of these encounters many times, but always as a reviewer of footage, never as the one being filmed. He knows how quickly things can slide. He knows that every word he says now will be on that body-worn camera, and eventually, he suspects, in his own hands. He takes a slow breath, closes the folder, and says he is willing to move along, that he does not want any trouble, but that there is no law against standing by his own car reading paperwork. He also knows it would be better if the officer understood exactly who he was dealing with before this spirals any further. So, carefully, without making any sudden moves, he mentions that he works for the department, that he is with the unit that reviews officer conduct, and that his ID and credentials are in his car. He does not spit out the words internal affairs like a threat. He offers them like context, hoping to flip a switch in the officer's mind. Instead of pausing or recalibrating, the officer seizes on another angle. He demands to see ID, but when the internal affairs chief reaches slowly toward the car to pick up his wallet, the officer snaps at him to keep his hands visible. There is an odd, jittery rhythm to the interaction now. Demand, pause, attempted compliance, new accusation. The officer alternates between telling him to get his ID and telling him not to move. He is not actually afraid. He is in control and knows it, but he is using that control like a hammer, and every normal human reaction looks like a nail. The Internal Affairs Chief does exactly what people are always told to do. He speaks clearly. He repeats that he is complying. He keeps his hands where the officer can see them until he is explicitly told to move. He explains again that he is with the unit that reviews conduct, that his job is to make sure encounters like this go the way they are supposed to go. He even mentions, in plain terms, that this kind of vague, suspicious person call is the sort that gets departments in trouble when things go wrong. None of that gets through because the officer is not listening for information. He is listening for confirmation that he is in charge. Every time the man says he has done nothing wrong, the officer hears defiance. Every time he mentions his role, the officer hears someone trying to pull rank. In the officer's mind, if you really worked for the department, you would have been humble and apologetic from the start. You would have stepped into line without question. The gas station clerk peers out through the glass, watching the scene unfold with the uneasy feeling that things are going further than they were supposed to. He wanted someone to come check things out, maybe ask the man to move on so the lot wouldn't be empty and weird for hours. He did not necessarily want to see handcuffs. But now that an officer is here, uniform and gun and radio all visible, the clerk feels powerless to do anything except watch. The officer gives one more command, phrased not as an option but as an order. The man is to leave immediately or face arrest. The Internal Affairs Chief glances down at the folder of files and then back up at the officer's face. He understands, with a slow, sinking clarity, that this is no longer about a phone call or a nervous clerk. This is about ego and control. It is about an officer who has forgotten that authority is supposed to be tied to law, not to mood. He says, one last time, that he will go, but that he is not refusing to obey anything. He simply wants it noted that he has done nothing wrong. He adds that if the officer genuinely believes otherwise, he is welcome to radio a supervisor and clear things up. That last suggestion, that someone higher up might get involved right now, is what finally pushes the officer over the edge. On camera, you can almost see the decision form behind the officer's eyes. His posture shifts, his jaw tightens, and he stops pretending this is a conversation. He steps in closer, closing the distance so the body cam frame fills with the man's chest and shoulders. His voice drops into that flat, echoing tone that means the outcome has already been chosen. He tells the man he is under arrest for loitering and refusing to leave when directed, the exact kind of vague catch-all charges that have turned minor encounters into life-changing events for countless people. The Internal Affairs Chief feels a rush of disbelief that quickly hardens into a cold, steady anger. He knows the law. He knows that nothing he has done tonight meets the standard for those charges. He also knows that arguing on the concrete under the bright lights of the gas station will not change the outcome now. The only thing that matters is what the camera sees and hears, and how that footage will look when played back under fluorescent lights in an office with the sound turned up. He straightens his back, closes the folder with deliberate care, and says the line that will echo through the rest of the story: that the officer is making a big mistake, that he is the new head of internal affairs for this department. The words hang in the air for a second, giving the officer one last chance to understand exactly where he is standing and who is in front of him. But the chance passes. The officer says he does not care who the man says he is. In his mind, if this were really someone important, they would not be standing by a gas pump in the middle of the night with a folder of papers. In his mind, no one has the right to challenge his decisions at the moment. He orders the man to turn around and put his hands behind his back. Slowly, the Internal Affairs Chief does exactly that. He turns to face the car, places his hands together at the small of his back, and stares at the reflection of the flashing lights in the window. The cuffs close around his wrists with a small metallic click that the body cam microphone picks up perfectly. His face is calm, but his mind is already moving ahead, to the report that will be written, to the questions that will be asked, to the footage that will be pulled and watched frame by frame. From the officer's point of view, the call is now handled. He has a suspect in custody. He has charges he can write up in a report. He has a story he can tell his buddies later about the mouthy guy at the gas station who tried to pull the internal affairs card and lost. As he guides the man toward the patrol car, one hand on his arm, he has no idea that his own name is sitting on a list in that folder, mentioned in connection with prior complaints, waiting to be cross-checked with the minutes of this very arrest. By the time the patrol car pulls away from the gas station, red and blue lights slicing through the dark road ahead, the damage is already done. The clerk will tell anyone who asks that the man seemed calm, that he did not see him cause any trouble. The body cam has captured every word, every command, every refusal to listen. The officer feels like he has reasserted control over a small corner of his world. What he does not see yet is that the world is about to get much bigger, and he is about to be the one standing under the harsh light while someone else presses play on his night at the gas station. By the time the patrol car doors lock and the engine hum settles into a steady vibration, the balance of power in that small city has already shifted. Neither man in the car fully feels it yet. In the back seat, Marcus sits with his hands cuffed in front of him now, the metal having been not really removed at booking officer insistence for comfort before transport. His wrists are red, not shredded, just marked enough to remind him that this is real. The folder of complaints and body cam summaries he was reviewing lies abandoned on the front passenger seat of Cole's cruiser, closed but not forgotten. The irony isn't lost on him. His own work has just taken a literal ride in the front, while he sits in the back like any other suspect. He watches the blurred lights of the city slide by through the narrow, scratched plexiglass window. Every intersection, every street lamp, every dark side road is a place where this could have gone differently if someone had made one better decision earlier. The clerk could have stepped outside and simply asked what he was doing. The dispatcher could have coded the call as check welfare instead of suspicious person. Cole could have walked up with a normal greeting instead of a tap that sounded like a warning. They didn't, and now, here he is, in the back of a patrol car, running through procedures in his head like it's someone else's case. In the front seat, Cole keeps one hand on the wheel and one resting near the radio, muscles loose, like this is just another end-of-shift report he'll be writing. He glances at Marcus in the mirror once or twice, not to check on his well-being, but to confirm that he's still quiet, still contained. In his mind, the hardest part is over. He took control of a non-compliant subject, made an arrest, and now the machine will do what it always does: process the guy, spit out charges, and move on. He has not really heard the words, "I'm the new head of internal affairs," yet. They bounced off the armor of his ego and fell somewhere behind him on the concrete at the gas station. The station is a different world at night. The fluorescent lights seem harsher, the linoleum more scuffed, the air thicker with the smell of stale coffee and sweat and disinfectant. As the cruiser backs into the sally port, the heavy metal door rattles shut behind it with a deep warehouse echo. For most people, that sound feels like a lid slamming on their life. For Marcus, it is a sound he has walked toward voluntarily hundreds of times in past jobs to interview officers and arrestees. It feels very different when you're the one walking in with your hands bound. Cole opens the rear door, gives a clipped order to step out, and guides Marcus into the booking area. There is a choreography here that the department has repeated thousands of times. The officer stands on one side of a worn yellow line, the arrestee on the other, the booking sergeant behind a high counter lined with forms and a computer monitor. Cameras watch from corners. A small live feed screen shows a row of holding cells. The booking sergeant on duty tonight is Ramirez, a veteran with 20 years in and the look of someone who has seen every kind of mess pass through her hands. She watches as Cole walks in with his prisoner, notices the business clothes, the calm posture, the lack of alcohol smell or obvious agitation. She also notices the folder with departmental letterhead being carried under Cole's arm. She raises an eyebrow. "What have we got?" she asks, voice flat but eyes curious. "Loitering, refusing to leave when directed," Cole replies, as if reading straight off a mental checklist. "Business here, said he'd been hanging around the pumps, wouldn't clear the lot, got mouthy when I told him to move on." Ramirez doesn't look at Cole. She studies Marcus instead, measuring the way he stands, the way his jaw is set, the way his gaze doesn't skitter around the room like most people brought in on vague charges. He looks like someone who is very carefully keeping himself inside a narrow lane of control. "You got ID on him?" she asks. Cole sets the folder on the counter and pats his pockets. He produces a wallet from an evidence bag, slides out a driver's license, and hands it over. Ramirez glances down, her eyes flicking across the printed name. She stops. The name is familiar, not because she's processed him before, but because she's read it on memos, seen it on email headers, heard it in briefings and hushed conversations in hallways where people complained about The new guy upstairs. She looks back up at Marcus, really looks this time, connecting the neatly combed hair and the lines of fatigue around his eyes with the official portrait that hangs in a frame near the chief's office. Sir, she says slowly, tone shifting on that single word, what did you say your role here was again? Marcus holds her gaze. I'm the head of internal affairs, he says. No hint of bluff, no edge of performance, just a simple recitation of fact. I arrived 3 months ago. My credentials are in the leather holder in my inside jacket pocket. The jacket is in my car, at the gas station where your officer arrested me. The room doesn't explode. It just gets very, very quiet. Cole bristles. Oh, come on, he says quickly, more to Ramirez than to Marcus. He said that at the scene. You know how many people pull that I work for the department nonsense? He was loitering. The clerk called. He refused to leave. Ramirez ignores him for a moment, still watching Marcus. You got any other ID on you now? She asks. In my wallet, Marcus answers. There should be a secondary card inside with the departmental authorization. It won't show my assignment, but it will have the correct officer number. You can verify it. Now she looks back at Cole. Did you check any of that before you brought him in? I asked for ID, Cole snaps, defensive heat creeping into his voice. He kept arguing about not doing anything wrong. I told him to leave. He didn't. That's refusal to comply. I'm not going to stand there all night while he debates me about policy. Ramirez has been doing this long enough to know that when an officer uses a lot of words like refusal and arguing and debate on weak charges, the story is rarely as simple as they want it to sound. She slides the secondary card out of the wallet, reads the number, and turns to her computer. Hold him there, she says. She types in the ID number, hits enter, and waits. The system spins for a moment and then spits out the entry. Hale Marcus. Internal affairs. Rank. Clearance level. Date of assignment. Department photo thumbnail in the corner. She doesn't swear out loud. She just exhales slowly through her nose and feels a tight headache form behind her eyes. She swivels back in her chair. Cole, she says evenly, step over here for a second. He hesitates, then obeys. She taps the screen with one finger. That him? She asks. He glances at the monitor, sees the name, sees the photo, sees the words internal affairs in capital letters where the assignment field sits. For the first time since the gas station, something like doubt flashes in his face. Could be, he says, trying to keep his voice steady. Picture's a couple years old, maybe. Could have faked it. People have done that. Ramirez closes the driver's license, the ID card, and the computer window in one smooth series of motions. He didn't fake our personnel database, she says. That's him. She stands, steps out from behind the counter, and moves toward Marcus. She doesn't immediately unlock the cuffs. Procedures are still procedures, but her posture is different, not deferential. He's still technically under arrest, but careful, professional, as if she's handling a live wire that could burn the whole building down if dropped. Sir, she says, I'm going to have you sit on this bench for a minute while I notify the watch commander. You will not be placed in a general cell. You will not be processed further until we sort this out. Do you understand? Marcus nods. I understand, he says. And Sergeant, thank you for verifying. There's no sarcasm in that last sentence. Just a quiet acknowledgement that someone finally did the bare minimum that should have been done at the roadside. Ramirez turns back to Cole. You, she says, the professional veneer thinning at the edges, go sit in the report room. Do not talk to anyone about this. The lieutenant's going to want to see your body cam as is, untouched. What? Cole demands. I followed the call. Clerk said, report room, she repeats. Now. He sees the line he can't cross in her eyes and decides not to push it, at least not with her. He stalks down the hallway, boots slapping a little too loudly, adrenaline finally starting to jump in his veins in a way that doesn't feel like victory anymore. In the report room, the computer screens cast a cold blue light over the desks. There are half-empty coffee cups, a stack of unfiled incident reports, a corkboard with shift schedules and memos. Cole drops into a chair, anger and unease wrestling in his chest. He replays the gas station encounter in his head, but not the way internal affairs will. He doesn't break it down legally or tactically. He remembers how satisfying it was to hear the cuffs click, how good it felt to shut down the back and forth. Then he remembers Ramirez's face when she saw the screen. Internal affairs. He's heard the same stories everyone else has, that the new head is serious, numbers-driven, not here to make friends. The older guys complain that IA is getting in the way of real police work. The younger ones joke about staying off his radar. Cole's main thought has always been simple. As long as you can write a report that sounds good and your buddies back you up, I can't really hurt you. Now he's realizing that the man who decides which reports make sense and which don't has personally experienced the worst version of Cole's attitude on a quiet night with no real crime. Back in the booking area, Ramirez picks up the phone and calls the watch commander. The lieutenant on duty, Frank Dalton, is a mid-level manager in a cheap suit, halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee when the call comes in. "Yeah," he answers. "Dalton." "LT, it's Ramirez at booking," she says. "We've got a situation where you need to come down on your own." "What kind of situation?" he asks, already sounding tired. "The kind where one of our patrol guys just walked in on an arrest for the head of internal affairs," she says plainly. "On loitering." There's a beat of stunned silence on the line. "I'll be right there," Dalton says. He hangs up, sets his coffee down, and rubs his forehead. He can already feel the migraine coming, the one that doesn't start in the brain, but in the career. Within 5 minutes, Dalton is in the booking area, tied slightly askew, expression carefully blank. He confirms Marcus's identity, offers a clipped, polite acknowledgement, and asks Ramirez to move Cole's prisoner to a small, private interview room instead of a holding cell. Marcus agrees, mostly because he wants to sit somewhere quiet and record his own timeline while memories are bright and sharp. Once Marcus is seated in the interview room, alone, Dalton and Ramirez step out to talk in low tones near the hallway. "Have you seen the body cam yet?" Dalton asks. "Not yet," she replies. "I wanted you here before anything was accessed." He says he was reviewing department files at the gas station. Clerk calls in suspicious person. Cole shows up, ignores the IA thing, hooks him on loitering. Dalton swears under his breath this time. "I need that body cam raw," he says, "and the dispatch audio, and the clerk's call. We lock it all down now, or this becomes a rumor fest by morning." He sends Ramirez to secure copies of the digital files, then goes to the report room to collect Cole. The conversation that happens there is short, but telling. Dalton closes the door behind him and stays standing. Cole looks up, trying to read his face. "Lieutenant," he starts, "I don't know what he told you, but..." Dalton cuts him off with a raised hand. "You arrested the Internal Affairs commander," he says bluntly, "on a misdemeanor loitering charge, after he told you who he was. That's about right?" Cole opens his mouth, closes it, then switches gears. "Sir, with respect, he didn't give me ID on the scene. He kept arguing about rights and policy. The clerk said he was hanging around and wasn't buying anything. I use my discretion. If we start letting everyone talk their way out of a call, This isn't about someone talking their way out of anything," Dalton says, sharp now. "This is about whether you had a lawful basis for detention, escalation, and arrest. And you didn't just do that to any random citizen. You did it to someone who knows the policy as well as the chief. Did you even take a breath when he told you his role?" Cole bristles. "He could have been lying," he insists. "People lie to us every day." "Sure," Dalton says. "And that's why we verify instead of slapping cuffs on a guy reading paperwork at a gas pump." For the first time, the word verify lands somewhere inside Cole that isn't just defensive. He remembers the folder, the printed reports, the departmental header, all the hints he ignored because he was focused on winning the conversation. Dalton doesn't press the point further, for now. He knows there will be formal interviews later, the kind where a union rep sits at the table and every sentence gets transcribed. "Here's what's happening," Dalton says. "Per policy, you're off the street pending review. Turn in your cruiser keys and your duty weapon. You're not under arrest. You're not suspended yet. You are relieved of field duty until this is sorted. Don't talk about this case with anyone. Not in the locker room, not in group chat, not anywhere. Understood?" The words hit Cole like a splash of ice water. "Off the street?" he repeats. "For doing my job?" Dalton stares at him for a long second. "If that's what the footage shows," he says, "you've got nothing to worry about." They both know that's not reassurance. It's a warning. Cole hands over his keys and his weapon, feeling naked and angry and suddenly very small. Without the car, the gun, the radio, he's just another guy in uniform waiting to find out how badly he just messed up. In the interview room, Marcus is alone with his thoughts and the quiet hiss of the ventilation. He sits at a metal table, cuffs removed now, a bottle of water in front of him. An empty notepad lies open, provided by Ramirez with a sympathetic look that stops short of open allegiance. He starts writing. Time of arrival at the gas station. He noticed a patrol car. Exact words of the first knock on the glass. Phrases used by Cole. His own responses, as verbatim as he can recall. He writes it the way he'd want any complainant to write. Detailed, calm, focused on facts, not on feelings. His emotions are there. Anger, humiliation, disbelief. But they move under the surface, not on the page. The page is for evidence. He has spent a lifetime telling people that if they want to be taken seriously, they need to give internal affairs more than raw outrage. Now he's building the kind of file he wishes some of Cole's previous complainants had been able to build. After 20 minutes, Dalton steps in. He looks uneasy, like a man caught between two burning buildings with only one small bucket of water. Commander Hale, he begins, using the formal title now that they're on record. First, on behalf of the Watch, I need to say, this is not how anyone wanted your night to go. Marcus lifts an eyebrow slightly. I'd imagine not, he says. Yet, here we are. Dalton nods, takes a chair opposite him, and leans forward. We're securing all the relevant recordings right now, he says. Your arrest, dispatch logs, the clerk's call, station video. The chief has already been notified. City Legal will be involved. I'm not going to ask you substantive questions for the investigation. That would be a conflict. But I do need to know how you want to proceed at the moment. We can either formally book and release you with immediate voiding of charges as soon as IA assigns an investigator from outside, or we can treat this as a detention that ended without charges, documented internally. Either way, there will be a record. Either way, this is going upstairs. It's a strange inversion of roles. Marcus is used to being the one offering paths, not choosing them. I want everything documented, he says. Arrest, booking, charges as written, no retroactive smoothing, no misunderstanding entries. The record needs to show exactly what happened to me so that when we look at what's happened to others, we're comparing like for like. Dalton winces internally at that phrase, what's happened to others, because it implies what he already suspects, that this isn't just about one bad night and one unhappy commander. It's about a pattern that finally tripped over the worst possible witness. All right, he says, we'll process and then release on recognizance pending review. The city attorney's office will probably call you first thing in the morning. The chief will want a meeting. I'll be there, Marcus replies. And Lieutenant? Yeah? Make sure the body cam stays untouched, Marcus says. No accidental overwrites, no missing minutes, no late uploads. You know how that looks, and so do I. Dalton meets his eyes. I'm not losing my career to a cover-up, he says. Not for this. The files are already tagged and locked. Only digital forensics and IA can move them now. Marcus nods once. For the first time since the knock on the glass, a thin edge of trust wedges into the night. He is officially booked, fingerprinted, photographed, then released. The charges are technically active, but everyone in that building knows they are a hollow shell, a placeholder around something much more dangerous. For the department, not for him. When Marcus walks out of the station into the cold pre-dawn air, his car is waiting. Ramirez arranged for an officer from another shift, someone Marcus has never met, to retrieve it from the gas station lot and bring it around. The folder is on the passenger seat, exactly where it belongs, the papers still stacked neatly inside. He sits behind the wheel, but doesn't start the engine right away. Instead, he takes out his phone and opens his notes app. He adds the booking number, the names of everyone he dealt with, the exact times of each step. Then he types one final line. First-hand reference case for pattern analysis. Officer Cole. Sleep is out of the question now. As the sky starts to lighten in a dirty gray strip along the horizon, Marcus drives not to his apartment, but to the department building itself. The front entrance is locked this early, but his keycard opens the side door near the administrative staircase. On the second floor, the lights are mostly off, but his office glows dim through frosted glass. He unlocks it, steps inside, and sets the folder down on his desk. Next to it, he places the new paperwork from his own arrest, still warm from the printer. 2 stacks, 2 stories. They are about to become one investigation. By mid-morning, the building hums with a different kind of energy. Word has leaked, because of course it has. A booking officer mentions something in the break room. A dispatcher asks why a specific file was locked down so fast. A patrol officer texts a friend. "You hear IA boss got hooked?" Rumor mutates as it travels, but the core stays the same. Someone just arrested the wrong man. In the chief's conference room, a closed-door meeting pulls in the key players: the chief, the city's legal advisor, the head of HR, the police union representative, and Marcus. A digital forensics tech has set up a laptop connected to a Yurge-mounted screen. On it, paused on the first frame, is Cole's body cam footage from the gas station. The chief looks older than his years this morning. He has the worn, careful expression of a man who has spent decades balancing public scrutiny, internal politics, and his own conscience, and who knows he has just stepped onto thin ice. "Before we start," he says, voice steady but low, "I need it on the record that this meeting is for initial review and risk assessment. The formal internal affairs investigation will be handled under policy by a team that does not include Commander Hale directly, given his role as complainant and subject. City Legal is here to advise on exposure. Union is here to ensure due process for the officer. This is not a disciplinary hearing, not yet." Everyone nods. The union rep, a stocky man with a tight jaw, looks like he's already gearing up for a fight. The city attorney, a woman with sharp eyes and a stack of color-coded files, looks like she's already calculating settlement ranges. Marcus says nothing. He just watches the screen. "Roll it," the chief says. The footage plays. From the body cam's point of view, the gas station looks exactly as Marcus remembers it. Harsh white light, wet concrete, empty pumps, his car sitting quietly with him inside. They watch as Cole approaches, as the gloved hand taps the glass, as the window rolls down. They hear every word. "You've been sitting out here by these pumps too long. The clerk called you in as suspicious. I didn't do anything. I'm just going over some work files while I wait for a call." "Doesn't matter." The room is silent except for the audio. Watching yourself in third person is always strange, but watching yourself in a moment where your rights are being bent is something else entirely. Marcus keeps his face neutral. He wants the footage to speak louder than his reaction. The union rep shifts in his seat once or twice, looking for angles. He notes the phrase "clerk called," the reference. To private property, the words "refusing to leave when directed." Those are hooks he can hang arguments on later. The city attorney writes down "no clear criminal articulation" and underlines it 3 times. When they reach the point where Marcus identifies himself as internal affairs, everyone leans slightly forward without meaning to. "I'm the new head of internal affairs for this department. I don't care who you say you are." The chief closes his eyes for a second at that, not long enough to look weak, just long enough to feel the hit. The video continues through the arrest, the positioning, the handcuffs. The tone is never shouting, never overtly violent. There is no shove, no drawn weapon, no screaming. On a superficial level, someone trying to defend the department could say, "See, no excessive force, no slurs, professional tone." But that's not what this is about, and everyone in the room knows it. This is about an officer using the label "suspicious" as a blank check. It's about ignoring identification, context, and lawful presence. It's about punishing someone for not being instantly submissive, not for breaking any actual law. It's about what happens when you combine authority with ego and remove restraint. When the footage ends, the room sits in heavy silence for several seconds. The union rep speaks first. "Look," he says. "Was this pretty? No. Does it look great on camera? Obviously not. But let's remember the context. Late night, recent incidents at that station. The clerk calls in a concern. My member responds. The subject doesn't immediately comply, starts arguing about rights, refuses to leave. That meets the threshold for a loitering arrest in this jurisdiction. The IA commander's identity wasn't confirmed on scene. That's a training issue at worst, not misconduct. The city attorney gives him a flat look. "A training issue is forgetting to activate your camera," she says, "not arresting your own internal affairs commander on flimsy grounds after he tells you who he is, while standing in front of documents that literally have our letterhead on them." The chief raises a hand before the two can escalate. "We are not arguing the full case in this room," he says. "We are determining whether there is enough concern to justify an internal investigation and whether any immediate actions are necessary for public trust and officer safety. He turns to Marcus. Commander Hale, he says, you've been very restrained so far. I appreciate that. As the complainant here, what is your position? Marcus takes a breath. When he speaks, his voice is calm, but there's steel under it. My position, he says, is that what happened to me is very likely a cleaner, safer version of what has already happened to multiple members of the public whose complaints I've been reading since I arrived. I was calm. I knew my rights. I identified myself clearly. I had a professional context that the officer chose to ignore. Most people don't have any of that. They just have a feeling that they were bullied, humiliated, or arrested for nothing. And when we read their statements, we explain a lot of it away as attitude or resisting verbal commands. He gestures toward the frozen frame of Cole on the screen. You want my professional assessment? He continues. This isn't about one bad judgment call. This is about patterns. The same officer's name shows up in a disproportionate number of complaints that describe very similar behavior. Vague suspicion, rapid escalation, use of catch-all charges when people fail the instant obedience test. Last night, he finally did it to the one person who can't be easily dismissed in a report. The union rep shifts again. Are you saying you came into this department looking to target him? He demands. Because if you already had him circled before this, that's biased. Marcus doesn't flinch. I'm saying I came into this department to identify risks, he replies. His file identified itself. I didn't fabricate prior complaints. I didn't write about his past supervisor's concerns. I didn't tell him to treat a routine welfare check like a test of dominance. He chose that, over and over. Last night, he chose it on camera with a member of command staff. That doesn't make my assessment biased. It makes it confirmed. The chief leans back, rubbing his jaw. We can't bury this, he says quietly. Not when digital timestamps, booking records, and our own commander are involved. If it leaks that we tried to handle it informally, we'll be crucified in the press and in court. The city attorney nods. At minimum, she says, we need to initiate a formal IA investigation with an external observer attached, state level or neighboring agency. Put the officer on administrative leave pending outcome. Consider whether this case triggers a broader pattern review. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that if this ever becomes public through a records request or litigation, every past complaint tied to this officer will be reopened in the court of public opinion. The union rep bristles again at the phrase administrative leave, but he also knows the optics. Even unions understand there are some hills not worth dying on. You're not hanging him out to dry alone, he says stiffly. If there were policy failures, training gaps, supervision issues, those need to be part of the record too. Marcus almost smiles at that. Weird, hearing a union rep argue for systemic context, but he stays neutral. The chief looks at him. You won't be led on this, he says. You can't investigate your own case, but you will, obviously, be at an interview party. In the meantime, I need you functioning. Can you continue in your role without this turning into a personal crusade? Marcus holds his gaze. Chief, he says, this is personal now. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but the work hasn't changed. The difference is when I talk about what it feels like to be on the wrong end of a badge, I won't be doing it from theory anymore. He lets that sit for a beat. That said, he adds, I know the difference between justice and revenge. I'm angry. I'm not out of control. The chief studies him, then nods once. Good, he says, because what comes next will be slow and ugly and watched from every angle. We'll open the file, bring in an outside observer, and notify the mayor's office that a high-risk incident is under review. We're not going to the press with this unless we have to, but we're not lying if someone asks. He turns to the union rep. Officer Cole goes on paid administrative leave effective immediately, he says. No field work, no overtime details. He'll be notified formally by the end of shift and given an opportunity to provide a statement with representation. If he refuses, that's his right, but the investigation moves forward with or without his cooperation. The union rep doesn't like it, but he's not stupid. He nods, jaw clenched. When the meeting breaks, everyone leaves with homework. Legal will draft notices and contingency plans. HR will review training records and supervision logs. The union will start prepping Cole for interviews. The chief will prepare his own explanation in case the city council calls an emergency session. Marcus walks back to his office. On his desk, The two stacks of paper wait, his arrest paperwork and the folder of old complaints tied to Cole. He places them side by side again, then reaches for a fresh legal pad. He draws a line down the middle. On one side he writes, "Gas station arrest, my case." On the other he writes, "Prior complaints, community cases." Under each header, he starts listing similarities: type of call, officer language, escalation points, charge selection. The pattern emerges in ink the same way it did in his head. Not a single catastrophic act of brutality, but a repeat cycle of ego, impatience, and punishment for non-submission. By the time the formal internal affairs case number is assigned, the incident is already mutating into 3 different stories. Inside the patrol locker room, it's Hale overreacted to a simple loitering call. In the chief's office, it's a critical liability incident with massive exposure. On Marcus Hale's desk, it's something else entirely. Exhibit A in a pattern he can no longer ignore. He knows better than to touch his own case directly. Policy is clear. A commander can't investigate an incident where he's both the complainant and the subject. So, the department does something it almost never does. They bring in help. A neighboring agency sends over a seasoned IA lieutenant named Sutter as external lead. State-level oversight assigns a monitor to observe. Marcus is officially walled off from investigative decisions and reduced to what every other complainant is supposed to be: a witness who tells his story once, under oath, and then waits. On the surface, that might sound comforting. In reality, it means surrendering control of the thing that upended his night and his reputation. The first formal interview happens in a bland conference room, with beige walls and clunky chairs that have seen too many budget cycles. A digital recorder sits in the middle of the table, red light blinking. On one side, Lieutenant Sutter, Internal Affairs from the neighboring city, and the state monitor, a quiet woman from the Attorney General's office who takes notes in tiny, precise handwriting. On the other, Marcus, hands folded, posture steady. "This will be recorded," Sutter says, reading from the standard script. "You understand you are giving a voluntary statement as a complainant and witness?" "I understand," Marcus replies. He walks them through the night again, leaving the office, the gas station, the knock on the glass, the dialogue. He keeps it dry, timeline first, conclusions second. Every time he feels anger torque the words, he forces them back into sequence. This happened, then this, then this. He knows the tape will be dissected later. He wants it to be as clean as possible. The monitor occasionally asks clarifying questions. Not softballs, not attacks, just precise probes. When he said suspicious, did you ask what specific behavior that referred to? At what point did you first mention your role? Did you ever refuse a direct command to exit the vehicle? Marcus answers without embroidery. If he doesn't remember the exact wording, he says so. When he's done, Sutter thanks him and stops the recorder. Procedure, no comfort, no apology. Just the machine doing what the machine does when someone finally makes enough noise. On the other side of the building, another recording is about to go very differently. Officer Cole sits at a table in a similar room, but with a union representative at his side. His body language is a mix of stiff defiance and creeping anxiety. His duty belt is absent. Per policy, he's unarmed during IA interviews. It makes him feel less like an officer and more like a defendant. Sutter reads the same rights, the same warnings about dishonesty. Then he hits play on a screen in the corner, the gas station footage from the body cam Cole wore that night. They watch it together. It's one thing to remember the incident in your own words. It's another to see it from a fixed, unforgiving angle that never blinks, never forgets, never sympathizes. Cole watches himself walk up too fast, tap the glass too hard, jump to suspicious and "the clerk doesn't want you here" without ever actually asking the clerk again. He hears his own voice dismiss Marcus's explanation. He hears the line, "I don't care who you say you are," and feels his stomach drop a fraction of an inch. When the clip goes black, the room is quiet. "Officer Cole," Sutter says, "is there anything in that recording you believe is inaccurate or misleading?" Cole swallows. "No," he says, "but it doesn't show everything I was thinking." Sutter doesn't smile. "Internal Affairs investigates actions," he replies, "not thoughts. Walk me through your decision-making then. Why did you treat the call as grounds for detention instead of just a welfare check?" Cole leans on the story he's been telling himself. Recent thefts, clerk's fear, time of night, need for visibility. He emphasizes officer safety, the ambiguity of suspicious person calls, the expectation that he do something when dispatched. Sutter lets him talk himself out, then starts breaking it apart. Did you observe any criminal behavior when you arrived? He asks. No, Cole admits, not directly. Did the subject refuse any lawful order before you informed him he was under arrest? He questioned me, Cole hedges, argued. Questioning is not refusal, the state monitor says quietly, speaking up for the first time. Did he at any point make a threatening movement, attempt to flee, or indicate he would not comply physically? No, Cole repeats, a little more tightly. Did you verify with the clerk whether they actually wanted him removed from the property? Sutter asks. I told him the clerk didn't want him there, Cole says. That's standard. Did you verify it? Sutter presses. There's a long pause. No, Cole says finally. They move on to the crucial moment. When he identified himself as Internal Affairs, Sutter says, why did you discount that information? People lie all the time, Cole replies. I've had guys claim they're FBI, CIA, mayor's nephew, you name it. You can't just shut a call down because someone drops a title. Did you ask for any corroborating detail? The monitor asks. Badge number, supervisor name, any questions at all beyond ID? I told him to show ID, Cole says. Then you told him not to move when he started to reach for it, Sutter counters. You created a situation where he couldn't satisfy your demand without risking being accused of reaching. Then you used his hesitation as evidence of non-compliance. That's a circular trap, officer. The union rep shifts in his seat. With respect, the rep says, jumping in, we're second-guessing split-second decision-making from the comfort of a conference room. My member was alone at a late-night gas station with strangers. Hindsight's perfect. We're not talking about half a second between someone grabbing a gun and someone firing, the monitor replies, unruffled. We're talking about several minutes of calm, conversation where the only escalating factor was the officer's impatience with being questioned. That's not split second. That's the attitude. The word lands hard. Cole's mind scrambles for footing. He tries another angle. He treated Marcus like anyone else, so it's equal treatment. But equal treatment isn't a shield when the treatment itself is wrong. By the time the interview ends, Cole knows how this looks. He also knows that the union can only do so much when you've recorded your own bad judgment in high definition and high audio clarity. The investigation doesn't stop with that one night. Sutter pulls old files, prior complaints against Cole, related dispatcher logs, any body cam footage still on servers. He finds a pattern that looks eerily like Marcus's notes. Vague suspicion, shaky legal justifications, resistance to de-escalation, reliance on attitude-based charges like disorderly conduct and obstruction when people ask too many questions. Not every complaint is sustained. Some are he said, they said with little evidence. Others are old enough that footage has been purged under retention schedules. But enough remains that a picture emerges, not of a monster, not of a headline-grabbing brute, but of a man who has been allowed to treat authority like a personal possession, and who's gotten away with it because the damage he caused never fell on anyone the department valued. Until now. Weeks pass, paperwork piles up. Marcus works his other cases in the meantime, refusing to let his own incident swallow his entire role. But every few days, another piece of his file crosses his desk to be signed as a complainant. Acknowledgement of rights, notice of potential outcomes, confirmation of interview transcripts. He signs each one with the same tight signature, never rushing, never delaying. The hearing comes on a gray morning that fits the mood. It's not a court trial, it's an internal disciplinary board. 3 command-level officers from within the department, 1 external representative from the neighboring agency, the state monitor, and a recorder. On one side of the long table sits Marcus, designated as complainant and witness. On the other sits Cole, with union counsel at his elbow. The chief does not sit on the board. He's deliberately step removed so he can make final decisions without being accused of stacking the panel. He watches from the back of the room, arms folded, jaw clenched. The proceedings are formal, but not theatrical. There is no jury, no public gallery, no cameras beyond the small one pointed at the table for record keeping. Still, it feels like a trial of something bigger than one night. The board chair, a captain with a long face and sharp eyes, lays out the allegations: unlawful detention, unlawful arrest, failure to properly investigate the validity of identification, failure to de-escalate, conduct unbecoming. She plays the body cam clip again. No matter how many times, they've all seen it, it still hits the same way when that line plays. I don't care who you say you are. Marcus testifies first. His prior statement is read into the record. He confirms it, answers a few extra questions from the board, then steps aside. He keeps emotion out of his voice. The facts are damning enough without flavor. Then it's Cole's turn. He stands, uniform pressed, boots polished, every outward sign of professionalism on display. If someone walked in with no context, they'd see a squared-away cop under unfair scrutiny. He leans into that, talking about his years of service, the dangers of late-night calls, the expectations placed on him to keep businesses safe. I treated Commander Hale the same way I would have treated anyone else at that scene, he says, looking the board in the eye. I didn't know who he was. I heard internal affairs, and I've heard every other lie under the sun. I made a call based on what I knew at the time. Was it perfect? Maybe not. But it wasn't malicious. I was doing my job. The union rep amplifies that line, warning against witch hunts and destroying a career over a misunderstanding. He points to the absence of physical harm, the calm tone, the lack of profanity or overt aggression. He paints a picture of a hard-working cop being sacrificed to politics because he embarrassed the wrong person. For a moment, it almost works. People are wired to sympathize with the familiar, and there's nothing more familiar in that room than a uniform and a narrative of danger. Then Sutter steps up with his findings. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't editorialize. He just walks the board through cold data. Number of complaints attached to Cole versus peers. Types of charges he favors. Frequency of refusal to leave and disorderly conduct used without clear underlying behavior. Instances where supervisors counseled him about tone and escalation but took no formal action. Body cam clips from other calls where the dialogue sounds uncomfortably similar. Someone questioning him sharpening his tone, the threat of arrest rising like a storm even when the weather doesn't call for it. This is not about a single mistake, Sutter concludes. This is about a pattern of using discretionary power as a tool of punishment rather than protection. If the commander had not been who he is, we would likely never be in this room. But the officer's conduct would be the same, and the person on the other end would be someone with far less ability to fight back. The state monitor adds a quiet bomb of her own. If this file landed on my desk with a civilian complainant instead of a commander, she says, my recommendation to the Attorney General would still be the same. This officer presents a significant risk of unconstitutional stops and retaliatory arrests. You're lucky you're not already defending a major civil rights lawsuit with footage, like this playing in a federal courtroom. That line leaves a mark even the union rep can't buff out. The board recesses to deliberate. Marcus waits in the hallway, staring at a framed photo of a community event from better years. Kids sitting in the front seat of patrol cars, officers smiling, everyone bathed in sunlight. The gap between the image and the reality grinding behind that conference room door feels like a physical wound. He doesn't want a spectacle. He doesn't want a sacrifice. He wants something harder to measure, proof that the system can correct itself before a body ends up on the pavement. After what feels like an hour and is probably 20 minutes, the board files back in. Everyone retakes their seats. The chair reads the findings in a level voice. On the charge of unlawful detention, sustained. On the charge of unlawful arrest, sustained. On the charge of failure to investigate identification, sustained. On the charge of failure to de-escalate, sustained. On the charge of conduct unbecoming, sustained. Cole's face goes slack for a second. He knew it was bad. He didn't expect every single count to come down that hard. The board's recommendation is clear. Termination, with notification to the state certification body for potential decertification review. In plain language, fired, and likely barred from being a cop anywhere else in the state if the process holds. They also recommend something else, a broader review of similar complaints across the department, new training mandates on low-level enforcement discretion, and the creation of an early intervention system that flags officers whose complaint patterns look like Cole's did before this night. Recommendations are not orders, but they're more than suggestions. They're the closest thing to a spine an internal system has. The chief accepts the board's findings. He has no real choice. Ignoring them would be career suicide, not just for him, but for every piece of legitimacy the department has left. Later that week, in a smaller office with HR present, Cole gets the official word, terminated for cause. option to appeal through civil service or arbitration, but with the IA file and the board's recommendation attached like a warning label. The union rep talks about fighting it, but they both know the odds. Arbitrators bend in strange ways, but footage like that is hard to massage into fairness. Cole clears out his locker in a quiet, stunned fury. Some colleagues clap him on the shoulder, mutter that he was done dirty, that this could have been any of us. Others keep their distance, suddenly aware of how much smoke had been coming from his direction all these years and only now recognizing it as fire. He walks out carrying a cardboard box of his own life, spare gloves, a family photo, a coffee mug with a sarcastic slogan about the thin blue lines. No badge, no gun, no radio. Just a very ordinary man leaving a building he once thought he owned a piece of. For Marcus, the outcome brings no celebration. On paper, it's a win, a bad pattern identified, documented, and removed before it produced something even worse. In reality, it feels like the bare minimum. One officer out of many, one pattern among several, addressed only because the wrong person got caught in its path. He pushes for more. In follow-up meetings with the chief and the city attorney, he lays out concrete steps, not just slogans. First, reclassify suspicious person calls by default as welfare checks unless a specific behavior is reported. Make officers articulate, on the record, what they saw before they escalate. Second, build and actually use an early intervention system. Not a paper form that gets filed and forgotten, but a digital dashboard that flags officers whose complaint rates, charge profiles, or use of force incidents are statistically abnormal. Not to punish automatically, but to force supervisors to act before someone like Cole becomes a lawsuit risk. Third, change the default around low-level, arrestable offenses like loitering and disorderly conduct. Instead of arrest if annoyed, shift to arrest only if every other option has failed and the underlying behavior is clearly documented. Train that, enforce that. Fourth, update the body cam review policy. Right now, footage is mostly pulled reactively, after a complaint. Marcus wants random audits, sampling routine calls, looking for attitude issues and early signs of escalation habits. Not gotcha games, but real performance checks. None of this is glamorous. None of it guarantees transformation. But it creates friction in the places where ego used to slide unchecked. The chief hesitates at some of it. Cost, morale, union pushback. But the city attorney quietly backs Marcus. She has seen the numbers. She knows how much one lawsuit can cost compared to one dashboard or one extra analyst position. The mayor's office, terrified of the phrase pattern of misconduct appearing in any state or federal report, greenlights the reforms. Not out of moral awakening, but out of risk management. Marcus doesn't care why they agree. He cares that they sign. And what about the night itself? The gas station, the clerk, the clip that started it all? The clerk gets a follow-up visit. Marcus goes back, weeks later, not in cuffs this time, not in plain clothes at a pump, but in a suit with a small notebook. The clerk looks nervous at first, then ashamed when he realizes who this is. I didn't mean for all that to happen, the clerk says, rubbing the back of his neck. You were there a long time. We've had some stuff recently. They told us if someone makes us uncomfortable, call it in. You did what you were told, Marcus says. The problem isn't that you called. The problem is what we did with your call. He explains briefly that there will be changes in how those calls are handled, that officers will be expected to think, not just react on autopilot. He doesn't mention the firing. That's not the clerk's burden. As for the footage, it doesn't stay buried. Under state law, with redactions, it's eligible for release after the investigation concludes. A local journalist who has been watching IA case logs files a request. Months later, a story runs, not a viral outrage explosion, but a quiet, detailed piece about how a routine call exposed a pattern in our police department. The clip appears blurred, faces softened, audio slightly altered to protect identities. Viewers still hear the bones of it, the knock, the accusation, the dismissal of "I'm internal affairs." They hear the cuffs. They see enough to understand the dynamic. Some people shrug. Could have been worse, they say. At least nobody got hurt. Others hear something that sounds uncomfortably like their own story, the one that never made it to the news because they weren't in a position to force anyone to watch the tape. Inside the department, the clip is used for something else. Training. New recruits sit in a classroom and watch it as part of a block on discretion and professional conduct. The instructor, a sergeant who used to roll his eyes at IA, now walks them through each decision point, pausing the video, asking, what else could he have done here? What actually justified this order? What happens when you treat suspicious as a blank check? Marcus sits in on that training the first time it runs. He doesn't speak. He just studies the recruits' faces as they watch. Some look defensive, crossing their arms. Others look disturbed. A few take notes. He's not naive enough to think a single lesson will erase the pull of ego, the temptation to lean on authority when tired and frustrated. He knows some of those recruits will ignore everything they're hearing the moment a civilian annoys them on the street. But he also knows this: they can never again say, "Nobody told me this was wrong." As for him, the night at the gas station becomes something he carries in a quiet, permanent way. There are moments when it blindsides him. Standing in his kitchen pouring coffee, he'll suddenly feel the phantom pressure of cuffs around his wrists, the memory of that tap on the glass, the tone of a man who believed the badge gave him the right to shut down questions instead of answer them. There are other moments when it sharpens his resolve. When he reads a new complaint that sounds like an echo of his own experience, he pushes harder instead of filing it under attitude. When someone in the department complains that IA is too aggressive now, he doesn't apologize. He thinks of the gas station lights, the wet concrete, the way his heart sank when he realized the officer was going to do it anyway. In the end, this story doesn't end with a parade or a press conference. It ends with a fired cop who will tell his version of events in bars and family gatherings for years. I got screwed over for doing my job, and with a city that quietly spends money upgrading policies and training to avoid the next hail and coal situation, turning into something far bloodier. It ends with a department slightly less blind to its own habits, not because of a grand revelation, but because one night, ego met the wrong man at the wrong gas station, under the wrong set of lights, and hit record on itself. And it ends with Marcus Hale, Internal Affairs Commander, walking into work each day knowing that he has something most people in his role never get: a first-hand memory of what it feels like to be on the pavement side of the badge. A memory that will not let him forget why his job exists.